Explain the group's approach to this project.
We started with screen and plinth, and that is where everything stemmed from. So we tried to define what they were and thought that there could be a connection between the two, but we were aware that they're not easily distinguishable. We then designed the way we knew with drawings and no making process, but when we brought farming materials into it, there was an understanding of the way it is used already by farmers, which is to adapt the material to the surrounding context, so our approach changed.
We focused on one material to further expand our knowledge of its possibilities. We found when we were making objects using other materials like ratchet straps or debris netting, it was quicker to make a plinth or a screen, but it wasn't an object that was beautifully made. Not much thought went into the objects this way, but when we pushed the Baler twine further and decided to make everything out of the one material, whether it was the rope or the connections through the weaving, it added another layer to the object, one that allowed other people to understand what we were trying to do with it.
At the beginning, the material substitutions was a method and approach to allow us to test if what we wanted to achieve was pleasant or viable, or if it was architectural. We were using our other materials to substitute Baler twine because we didn't fully understand its capabilities. But once we got that knowledge, then we were able to try it with the Baler twine.
It was an organic process, so it was make, critique, adapt, critique. This would open up other avenues that we hadn't thought about, and we kept testing and experimenting throughout, so we learned the capabilities of material. We got the information to back up what we thought. Instead of assuming how the material would work, we found out its capabilities, and that informed us so we could develop the project further from this knowledge.
It was the knowledge that we gained through working with, testing and using the material that informed the direction that we went and the ideas and the products that we eventually produced.
Comfort, suspension, experimentation and detail. Explain how the group arrived at these.
Comfort came from the definitions of plinth and screen. With plinth, which is mostly the horizontal element, we had a desire to make something that was interactive. We wanted something people could sit on, and with this we wanted the element to be comfortable to use.
Suspension came about when we left the studio and went into the forest. It was when we traced through the forest to areas that appealed to us, we would want to stop, and sometimes these areas weren't as accessible as others. One space was above a river, and the idea of being able to pause above the river and relax and be able to focus on the canopy above and reach spaces that aren't normally accessible, that was what really pushed the suspension aspect. For us, experimentation was a big part. We were not always sure how to turn a single strand of material into a surface, so we would experiment a few different methods of joining it to make it into a net or a mat or something we could apply to the surface in order to support a person. So we made small prototypes of weaving cable ties through the middle of the twine, or we made a jig and also tried different types of knots. Without doing those kind of simple exercises, we weren't able to further push the design. It was through learning from experimenting that we were able to reevaluate what was possible and what wasn't, and then design from what we had learned.
Detail was important because the methods used by craftsmanship within architecture achieve a level of beauty that only comes through strong and deep understanding of the material. We realised through our discussions that you really know when you can understand a material is when you can make it beautiful, so that you can dictate it and mould it into something that looks visually appealing as well as being functional. It became an aim to understand Baler twine to a level of that detail that allows us to create something beautiful.
Explain the usefulness of the rigorous discussion and feedback.
This project would have been totally different if it wasn't within a group, because it was constant feedback. All the time we were together making something, we had feedback from each other and we were able to bring each other's abilities into it. Whether someone is good conceptually or otherwise, you start to learn from each other, and from that, and then you put your own abilities and new abilities back into the project.
I think the discussions probably pushed us to a level we would normally achieve. We probably wouldn't have sat that long, which we were sometimes a few hours to get to the nitty gritty of what we thought about architecture, what we thought about screen and plinth, what we thought about material, what we thought about process of design. It comes back to that understanding of detail and that the discussions were a catalyst for pushing that forward, because otherwise we might have accepted that we have achieved an end and we could have cut the project off at many points. But because of the continual critiquing and delving deeper, it meant we pushed ourselves further.
Discuss our approach to forms of representation.
It was about loosening up, so we strayed away from the generic form of having X amount of sheets with the typical information seen in studio and started thinking about how our work would be viewed and how our process would be viewed and how we best communicate that to somebody. We had these aims and wanted to show people what we have been doing the past few weeks, so we chose a few images and ended up having a lot of discussion about them. And it was because we heavily edited our work to represent it, which brought a lot of good conversation from it.
It was about having time and inhabitation of the gallery that we were able to control the space successfully. We knew from using Baler twine as a material, we could make a screen that would orientate the user and create a space that was inclusive, inviting, warm, comfortable, as well as informative. So we were able to use the material and respond to the context in order to create an exhibition space that was able to convey such an expressive meaning. Having that frame of the gallery, we were able to show that we can deliver and we have understood this material in an in-depth way.
Explain how technology assisted the group.
We did try and use a lot of different aspects of technology within the university. So whether that was using the laser cutter to make our rope maker, and then the strength testing machines to be able to test what we had made, that allowed us to gain the information and the facts to inform and direct the process onwards.
Structure for Motion, laser scanning and 3D Builder were some programs we used in getting a scaled image of what we had built and how that image can actually be beautiful by itself. Yet it hasn't necessarily been drawn by you, but it has been created by you. Also, from using other technologies around the university, you're often in discussion with someone else from another background, and you actually are able to understand how someone else perceives your work, and so you learn the best way to represent that in turn.
I think because we used the scanning technology later on, it was more a form of representation, but because we always knew we were going to use technology and we didn't necessarily know it was going to be useful, it gave us the time to make more and allowed us to create drawings quickly and accurately without the worry of having to sit down and draw it ourselves.
Explain how the group reached the outcome of the chair and other end products.
The chair came from the idea of creating a mat, a surface area that we can construct in a way depending on its context. We used the environment of the gallery to place this mat in it, and it became a comfortable chair. The adaptability of the Baler twine and the products that we made are only responding to different contexts that it is set up within.
It wasn't a sudden thing. We ended up with these series of products that conveyed the versatility of the process that we had gone through and the versatility of the capabilities of Baler twine, and that it was really that we had experimented in all those different methods, and it was almost post-rationalization in the sense of how can these be used in mainstream architecture, and it was a development that only became apparent towards the end.
Would there have been a next step to the project?
You can always go further, but we arrived at a series of products and they're viable, but perhaps the two next things would be how to mass produce them as an actual product and how to industrialize them. So how do you make the process of making more industrial? How do you deconstruct it when it is no longer needed? We had a skill level for how to hand make this that you would need to teach people. But is there a way to make it through a machine, or do you mass produce it? It would be about bringing it into the real world.
And finally, what have you gained from this project?
The idea of rigour in architecture, it was a word that was used throughout the semester. So the rigour of knowing a certain material, you know, it's scientifically, creatively, you know what context to put it in, you know it so well by the end of the semester you can apply it to anything. It was the rigour of representation as well, the rigour of how to distill the amount of information into one form of presentation and still show the rigour of our process, and even just the rigour of working in a team to allow other people's abilities to come through and you learn from their abilities as well.
That making something shouldn't be second to designing, because through the making process it encourages intuitive investigation and creative design and really pushes the project on and allowed further discussions that wouldn't have arisen through traditional ways of designing in a studio.
I agree with this, and it's clear that we all took the same from it. Just to expand on that, it's the rigour of knowing that it is okay to push something without really knowing where it is going, but trusting in the process so that when you get to the end, you achieve it in ways that you didn't necessarily realise that you were going to, that it wasn't what you envisioned, but it was still successful. And the value of working in a group, it progresses an idea much quicker and you're able to draw out potential issues with it a lot quicker because of the constant discussions. And then for representation, you're understanding and being able to edit your presentation enough to convey what you want the audience to know really clearly.